So that's an excellent presentation, Dr. Côté. I really appreciate the update on the gluten-free research. I think we have seen quite a bit, and I agree that the research recently has actually increased in this area. And I'm very, very happy to hear that Lallemand has solutions for that as well. Mainly when we go into trends, a couple of years ago when we went into this trend really strong, we saw a revolution in ingredients. Now we're seeing a revolution in shelf stable products. And I think that's the normal course of progression for any new innovation, right? Yep. So really happy to see Lallemand having a solution for shelf life for gluten-free.
I think, and Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, but the eggs are and the fat are contributing to the emulsification, and they will contribute to the prevention of the recoiling of the amylopectin and the amylose molecule. So they may help in slowing it down. I don't think there are the solution to, and also, if you have more fat in your formula, more chances of oxidation, and so that stale aroma that can also develop faster. But the sugar can maybe help bind the water, preventing the water from migrating. So in that sense, maybe helping in the slowing down the, so each ingredient here that are listed have a role, positive and negative, and probably Dr. Lin, you want to comment on this also?
I'll let Dr. Keith go first.
I'm a doctor.
You're a doctor for sure.
I'm not a doctor, but Lynn is right. It comes back to balance. You want to have your formula completely balanced. Fat will lubricate. If you have a gluten product, it's going to lubricate the proteins. And gluten-free, you want to really limit your fat because you're getting a lot of your lift typically from the emulsion with your eggs. Your eggs are creating a foam, but too much fat is going to break that down. So you have to emulsify that fat. So then you're going to want to use emulsifiers for that. But if you want to control your staling, it really comes back to you want to have a maltogenic amylase. That is the perfect enzyme in this solution because it's more thermal stable than an alpha amylase. But what it's going to do, it's going to transform that starch into maltose and dextrins. And doing so, it's going to cleave those chains, making them very, very short. In addition to, it's going to prevent, the biggest part of saline that you're going to see with gluten-free is the amylopectin. If you remember the picture that Jacinthe just showed, it's this branch. It's going to prevent that open tree from going back to its closed form. So if you break those branches, and that's what that enzyme is going to do, it's going to break those branches and therefore creating sugars, which is going to tie up the water, help you even further, but it's going to prevent the branch from closing up, taking the water with it, which is your staling mechanism. So hopefully that explains a little bit better.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that. Have you ever put Christmas trees together, like the plastic ones?
Yes.
If you put them together like I do, I love plastic Christmas trees. But you know how they come like really well formed, right? So you have to peel the branches aside one by one and just to make it fluffy. That's how I would like everyone to imagine that, right? So after you fluff up your tree, you put all your tinsel, your decoration, and and stuff like that. So that's what butter and that's what sugar does, right? It gets into there so that the tree can't close up, because trust me, I tried closing up the tree with everything on there. It doesn't work. It doesn't go right back into the box. But if you think about that, anything that disrupts the branches from going back into its original position is going to help the scaling aspect, the retrogradation aspect. Though butter and sugar works, the most effective way of doing this is really enzymes. It's really shelf life extension solutions, because basically you just peel the branches off and they are no longer able to go back to its original form. So you need to think about it that way. Okay, so if you think, well, I'm going to add in more butter, I'm going to add in more oil, then you have to really understand your product's shelf life potential. Are you going to put it through freeze thaw? Is it going to stay 30 days on the shelf? If it's going to stay probably like 7 to 14 days, you don't really need to worry about lipid oxidation like Dr. Côté said. But if it's longer than that and it's going through freeze thaw through many channel distribution, you need to worry about the oxidative aspect of things when you put in so much lipids and oils. Okay. So basically some emulsifiers would help with that, but mostly chelating agents. But I don't know, Dr. Côté, what in terms of solutions that you may have, enzyme solutions to prevent this oxidative changes.
It's actually it's surprising, but what we see is like the aromas that are generated by, if you do like a pre-ferment with like our aromatic yeast or with sourdough, it's those compounds that are generated, those fermentation metabolites, the aromas and things like that. It's like they have, like, first of all, they counteract the lipid oxidation process, and or they overwhelm the oxidative flavor, because in the multi-grain whole wheat bread, why do we put so much sugar, Lynn? Is to mask the lipid oxidation. So people are eating lipid oxidation agent molecules. It's just they don't taste it because there's so much sugar in the formula.
You have to also understanding a sugar is a huge water activity reducer. So once you reduce the water activity, oxidative activity also reduces.
It does.
Sugar could be one solution.
No, I understand, but I'm lipid oxidation and water. So lipid oxidation is influenced by the water content in bread.
Water activity.
It is okay. I'm sorry. I'm not the expert in that field, but so that's good to know. Thank you. But basically, what we think it's either it's I don't know. It's like these compounds have antioxidant properties. So in that sense, they counteract the lipid oxidation. That's one possibility. But the other possibility is that they're masking. They're going above the sensory threshold of the lipid oxidation molecules by being more powerful in the mouth. Those fermentation nutty flavors. So it's not yet fully elucidated, the mechanism of action, but it seems that it could be a combination of the two. The fermentation metabolite could be acting on as an antioxidant and as a masking agent in a way. Yeah.
Plus, as you create the acids too, the acids themselves have such a strong impact on sensory. That too changes the way you interpret and eat the bread, because you only pick up when you macerate the food in your mouth, you're only going to pick up sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami. The rest really are aromatic volatiles. And so when you taste that, that's very powerful, the taste versus aromatics. The aromatics come into play a little bit later on, but the first sensory attribute is coming from your tongue. And that's really the most important. And if it's palatable in your tongue, everything else, even if the bread isn't all that good, it works. If you have the right flavor combination, you don't necessarily have to have that perfect texture, but as long as it's pleasant and appealing in the mouth, with your first sensory hit, that's that really makes the end product really nice.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Great. Next question, Joanna. The the yeast raised products, they're all clean label, but the chemical leavening products, it depends on what you assume as clean label. A lot of people don't assume SALP or sodium aluminum phosphate as clean label.
Yeah.
And there are substitutions on the market right now. We are seeing good advancements with a calcium-based clean label solution with a sodium bicarb. So regardless of what you decide, you always need to have the sodium bicarb base and the acid, right? And I've seen everything from tartaric acid to different organic acids, which is really not good for processing. It's very unstable, to MCP and SAPP, right? So you can find out all those terms on BAKERpedia and what it means. But it really depends on who you sell to and what is your motivation for removing some of what claims to be dirty on your label. So there are solutions out there, and if you search BAKERpedia, you should be able to find it. Okay, go to the first stop should be leavening acids. Okay, so just go to that topic first.
Maybe one thing I'd like to say about those chemical leavening agents is it, unfortunately, and I'm wearing my nutritionist hat here, unfortunately, they're a great contributor to the total sodium content of your recipe. So if it's something you're watching over, it's and what we see now is that there are ways to bring food to the yeast to allow the yeast to fermentate. So and maybe you can, it can prevent you from
use yeast. You know,
Yes.
so maybe you don't need to, because I think
You don't need
originally we didn't use yeast because there was not much to
It
ferment.
wasn't food, correct?
Now we know more about how to provide food to the yeast. There are different ways, different solutions. We have solutions to help in that regard. It's just, you just need to try to generate it from what you have in the dough, basically, and maybe that can prevent you from using those chemical leavening agents altogether.
Correct. And plus, if you have a good batter, you're going to create an emulsion. You're going to get a lot of air whipped into it. You're going to use the yeast. If you use an enzyme, an alpha amylase or multigenic amylase, you're certainly going to create more sugars where the yeast can feed. And that seems to be the direction that I'm seeing today, where everybody's trying to pull away from the chemical leavening and go more towards the yeast, because that's the profile that they're trying to go after. And that really is a trend that we certainly would want to push also, because there are enzyme solutions for that. I'll answer that. That really is old school philosophy. Yes, enzymes before, we didn't know as much about them as we know today. They're really easy to use today. We certainly would like to work with the customers and help guide them. We have technical data sheets with all the products that we send, but certainly phone conversations are a helpful way to use in dosage. And just every customer that we work with, that we sell yeast to, they use dough conditioners, and we're all enzyme-based dough conditioners, and we have no issue with that. They're quite easy to use. You just follow the recommended dosage. You start on the low side and bring it up, and they're not voodoo science as what they once were 20 years ago. And most bakeries today don't have any issue with them at all. Temperature and mold load. Where you are, it's hot and humid. You have a lot of mold in the area. What I would recommend you need to have a good GMP setup, where I would want to do plate counts post-bake to find out where your mold load is coming from. Then you're going to do constant swabs and bakery cleanups in those particular areas. And then you should see an improvement of your shelf life. Certainly a lower pH, in addition to using like a cultured product, a cultured sugar to give you additional days. But we do see, even here, when it's a really hot period, most bakeries here are going to lose several days on their shelf life. It really comes down to how much mold is in the air, how much mold is on your contact points, and it's getting transferred to the product. When you have a very high mold load, you're going to mold fast. When in the wintertime here, particularly in Canada, We can see bread go 3 weeks without even molding. Out of a bakery in the summertime, that's only going to give you 10 days. So that's really the difference in temperature in addition to the mold load. And temperature, higher temperatures, you have a much higher mold load in the area.
A lot of the malts in the market is extracted from barley, and barley's not gluten-free.
Yeah.
So
I say I didn't see it commonly in the survey I did. It was not a common ingredient.
right. So you need to be careful to make sure that a malt is not from barley. And if that's any other kind of malt, maybe sorghum malt, maybe. But to really be sure that it's gluten-free, you need to ask the malt supplier, or go to enzyme route, go to amylase route, so that's one thing that you need to take note.
It doesn't seem to be commonly used, but from what I've seen so far.
We do. We have different yeasts, but in this situation, if we're focusing on gluten-free, we're just going to recommend just what we would recommend to everyone else, just our standard yeast, baker's yeast that we're going to use. For high sugar applications, we do have different strains. For frozen dough, we have different strains. But in this situation, we're just going to recommend just a typical regular baker's yeast, which is sold predominantly throughout all of North America and the world.
Yeah, it's available fresh form. It's in the case of Lallemand, it's a Lallemand brand of fresh yeast. It's crumbled or in a block, depending. And otherwise, the instant dry yeast, which is really great. Our brand is InstaFirm. It keeps a shelf life for 2 years until you open the pack, and then it has quite a long shelf life after that if you store it properly. So yeah, you're right. The red the red packaging is the one that we would recommend.
Ideally, I'm going to say you want an IDY. You want an IDY because the IDY has extra glutathione because of the process. So you're going to lose yeast in the process of the drying process when you manufacture it. So that's going to give you extensibility, which is going to help you. But depending on the production, IDY comes at a premium versus fresh. So everything is a balance of cost. And, in a perfect world, we would say use IDY because it's very controlled, meaning you're going to get the consistent gassing power all the time. Fresh, there's a variation, it changes, from day one when you get it versus 2 weeks, there's a change. So you have to adjust your bakery, but the cost and use is significantly less. So it really comes down to cost. Excellent question. You're going to want to use a multigenic analyte. So we have a product called Essential Soft 1500C, which Jacinthe talked about in the presentation. C designates that it's going to be a gluten-free carrier. It's going to be a rice carrier. The multigenic amylase is without a doubt the best enzyme in the world to use. If you go back 15 years ago, it was available 20 years ago, but the price and use or cost and use was so expensive that you just couldn't use it. Today, you can use it at much higher dosages, and what it's going to buy you, it's going to give you crumb softness over time. It's going to give you that crumb resilience. If you go back to the slide that Jacinthe also showed, it gives you better crumb resilience. Particularly in gluten-free, you're going to get those benefits, which is something that you're looking for. So it's going to change the overall texture of your bread, giving you softness over time. You're going to prevent staling. With that prevention of staling, it's just going to be a much more palatable bread. And then you're also going to get improved resilience, which again, you're going to notice when you bite into that product and you macerate it in your mouth. You're going to have a different texture with that, in addition to your ability to store it and stack it at the store, where you're not going to have a deformation over time of one product stacked on top of the other, where you end up with a much more flatter product. you want to add enough yeast to get the volume that you're looking for. If you, in any product, you're going to have a pan height that you're looking for or a proof height that you want to get to. So when you're using yeast, it takes time. So there's a certain amount of fermentation time. Typically in a regular yeast leaven product, you want roughly an hour of proof time. And with that proof time, you're looking for a certain height. In pan bread, typically 100 centimeters is what you're looking for. Or I'm sorry, millimeters. Under 115 millimeters, not centimeters, but millimeters. And then from that point, then you take it to the oven. With gluten-free, it's a little bit different. You know, you're going to mix up. You're going to get a batter that you want, and then you're going to give it just some time for the yeast to work, give you the flavors that you're looking for, and then you're going to bring it to the oven. But it's a balance of dosage, and every product is a little bit different depending on how much sugar you have in there. Some it's going to take longer, some less, and it's trial and error. There is no magic rule when it comes to gluten-free.
If you want to accelerate the process, you can add more yeast. And if you want, you can extend the time and add less yeast. So it's there. It all depends on what's your process, what you want to achieve at the end, but also how you want to achieve it, how you want to get there.
Thank you, Dr. Côté and Keith. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for organizing.
You're welcome.
All right, and see everyone else later in the next BAKERview. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.